certainly giving the latest ones a try. But I was very, very disappointed with eLive by the way it's delivered on its site. And just very briefly, I'll say why. It appeared at the time that I looked at it that it required a donation, which is fine. I've donated to many of the projects that I use regularly, and I've got no problem doing that. eLive was a little bit different though, because what it did is it seemed to give you until you made a donation, you couldn't get the fuller version, if I remember rightly. I'm trying to sort of scour the site now to find out what it says, but yeah, it was basically along the lines of it was sort of virtually a forced donation of sorts, and if you didn't want to donate, you could send an email off or tick a box on a web-based form to say that you didn't, or you couldn't afford to, and you get a free key to use the thing. And it just smacked me of being a bit too commercial, too forced, and although it looked lovely, it looks a fantastic distro, I really resented that type of marketing towards me. So
yeah, it is controversial. I think this is the type of thing which would distance people from the distro, which is an extreme. Well, to tell you the truth, I've never actually used it myself. At least not this distro. One of the things they did well was they put some 3D effects since 2008, maybe 2009. They started to put some compies inside, and which would be quite unusual for you to do with this type of desktop environment to begin with. Even though it's very impressive even without 3D effects, because it's got all kinds of nice transitions, and it's got very nice GUIs and everything, and the window decorations is very pleasing. But one thing I thought about the other day, once in a while, I'll tell you the truth, maybe once a week, Plasma Desktop kind of crashes on me, which isn't a big deal, because in KDE 4 you can just restart. I actually have a little script to make it very fast, just kind of restart, or shut down and then start again the Plasma session or the Plasma desktop on my environment. But when it does fall down, it makes you realize that mostly what you need are the applications. And as long as you have as long as you have a fairly close menu somewhere where you can open things, or as long as you can give commands for things to open, all you need basically is for X server to just render your screens, and you need your applications to be available somewhere on the screen. You don't necessarily need all the desktop complications, and therefore you could, in general, run just about any desktop environment, and as long as you get access to your applications, and Qt and GTK are just handled fine by the underlying platform, it should just be fine. It should just be a lot more stable too in some cases.
It's funny you mentioned about the issue you had. I've noticed an issue with Emerald Decorator, and it seems I download a lot of stuff from Vodo. It's a fantastic site. I'm sure everybody who's listening to the show has already been there. There's some great works there from people who are incredibly talented, and when you see some of the rubbish that comes out of Hollywood, you do wonder why these people are still merely just on a site like Vodo and not world famous, because there's some really talented people there. But I've noticed with some DivX and Xvid movies or film clips that once they've stopped, or once I shut them down, my borders and all the decorations completely get removed off my desktop, and I too have to reload. I have to reload Emerald for it to come back. It's not a problem, and funnily enough, Roy, I've got a shortcut as well. I've got a hotkey that I just press to redo that. And the problem is, it's not with every single file, and it's not every single time with the same file. So I've been trying to narrow the cause, and it could well be something that I've done, because I do like to fiddle about with my system a lot, so it could well be one of my own errors. But just something I noticed.
You're running from the command line. You could actually get something to tell you.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Roy, that where it happens. It only happens regularly when I notice it. It maybe doesn't happen once a week. It's maybe once every 3-4 weeks, and I cannot predict it. Just for one apparent reason, it'll just.
When it happens the first time, one thing I did on Friday, the new version of Chukok, which is the Identica client that I use, was released, I think, on Thursday, maybe Wednesday, and I upgraded. And it kept crashing, at least for the first few runs. I couldn't quite resolve the issue.
Sorry, Roy, one second. Right, sorry about that. had to close the connection very, very briefly there. Unfortunately, my personal life intrudes on the TechBytes audio cast. I had the Sky engineer around to stick our other LNB socket back together again as it fell apart a few weeks ago. So now that's done, and I'm back online. We'll carry on with the show. Sorry, Roy, very rude of me. If you want to
I think
carry
the
on from where we
last
left off.
topic we spoke about was how to try and find out an application crashing on you, and how to find a way to get around that. And I was just saying to you, you could run it from the command line. That's one of the most basic things you probably ought to do first, especially if you have some, a couple of crashes. You could very easily find the issue. And what I did when I upgraded from, I was using a release candidate of Chukok until about Friday. And on Friday, just for the release, I was using the stable final version, which has just been released. What happened then, it just kept crashing for whatever reasons. I assumed maybe my settings, or, maybe I had to delete my settings directory to make the upgrade. And it just crashed and crashed like 20 times, and I was trying to do some debugging with the command line. Eventually, I found out it was probably one of the plugins I was using. So I knew which one to disable based on the very verbose bunch of messages in the command line. It was very obvious what it was that led to the crashes, which you wouldn't see otherwise. And of course, you can also go further down to using S-trace, lots and lots of signals and messages if you want to find out the exact cause and where it crashed and what led to it. So that's a very nice thing. The reason I bring this up is because lots of people talk about why Linux is very good for development and also very good for the users. When things don't work, it doesn't take. You don't have to be a programmer to sometimes read something that says, oh, well, opening the dictionary, program crashed, as opposed to just the program crashing and you don't really know what it was doing before it crashed. And this is really hard to do with Windows because you can barely invoke things from the command line. It doesn't actually have so much of the notion of I/O and things going into the command line and making it available to the user to do that. So yeah, that's just the experience I had. And the reason we came to this subject, we actually arrived at this subject, was we were talking about what happens when the Plasma desktop crashes, or when you're just left with nothing but the application on your desktop, which ideally is what's supposed to happen. What lots of people do is they use the operating system just as a kind of a shim or a kind of a layer that is supposed to help you run the applications and get access to services. So when you open the file, it gives you your, a good way of interfacing with files in your local system, things like that.
Well, I mean, 2 points. Firstly, the problem I had, like I say, I have to stress it may be of my own making. But secondly, because it's so infrequent and so unpredictable in terms of being able to judge when and if it's going to happen, I've never really filed a bug report because it'd be impossible for me to do that because I couldn't be specific enough for somebody to emulate the error. And that's the same reason why I've never approached the command line to try and track the bug down. I mean, this literally is one of these things where it might not happen for a month, it might not happen, or it might happen twice in a week, and it really, in the grand scheme of things, hasn't been any sort of major factor on my desktop experience, apart from I have to press a hotkey very quickly to reload the Windows decorator. However, the strange thing is, I mean, the only reason I've been able to limit it down to Emerald is because if I don't load Emerald at all, I never get it. So that's why I've sort of narrowed it down to Emerald itself. But like I say,
applications specific. I mean, what you're talking about is not a very normal application. It's not exactly an application which runs, which is running as an application that's a self-contained thing. It actually kind of latches itself onto other applications too and makes itself part of the session. The reason I bring this up is in KDE, and especially with KDE applications, when the program crashes, you can very easily file a bug report based on what you were doing. And the way it would work is basically you give some details of what you were doing when it happened, and maybe you know a pattern of what it takes to reproduce the bug. But then what it does is also it also takes all kinds of signals and tries to emulate what was happening before the crash, and also grab some symbols, some debugging, all kinds of symbols which may be useful to the person who's developing the project before you file a bug report. Almost automatically, it basically generates the bug report for you. You sometimes have to download some packages. It actually proposes some packages, development packages you may want to download in the background to make it available to you to get all the details to the developer. But the way it works is, I think it's very different from what I can recall from